Good afternoon. My name is Natalia Kuraeva, and I'm an instructional designer at Teaching and Learning with Technology. On behalf of the Rutgers University Online Learning Conference, I am delighted to introduce Corey Ptak and Sari Kadzan from Rutgers University. We are pleased to have them present embedded learning assistance, support active engagement in remote courses. During the presentation, please use live Q&A to ask any questions of the presenters. At the end of each presentation today, there will be a short survey displayed. Any feedback you can provide is greatly appreciated. Enjoy the presentation, and thank you.
So hello, everyone. Welcome to our session on embedded learning assistants and how they can support active learning in remote courses. So we're just going to share some slides and we're going to get started. All right. My name is Dr. Corey Ptak. I am Director of Integrated Academic Support Programs at the Rutgers Learning Center. That's a fancy way of saying that I'm the Director of the Learning Assistant Program. And joining to me today is Sari Kadzan. I'll have her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you again for joining our session today. So like Corey said, my name is Sari. I work at the Learning Centers as our training specialist. I oversee the peer leader training program and professional development workshops that we offer for all of the peer leaders who work for our centers, as well as partnering campuses. And we'll be speaking more to one of our peer leader programs involving the learning assistants. So great to see you all.
Okay. So just as a general overview of today, we're going to go over an overview of today's session. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about what the learning assistant model is and what are learning assistants and how do they work inside the class to create engagement. And then we're going to talk specifically about the ways that learning assistants were implemented in the switch to remote instruction. And we're going to close today by showing you a little bit of a video clip of an LA actually in a group session, so we can kind of see the tactics that learning assistants take in facilitating group discussion during what this is an actual breakout room in an actual lecture class, so we can really see the LA at their brightest. So during today's session, please feel free to use the discussion boards and the question and answer functions of the on-air platform, because we're going to be monitoring those as we go. Okay. So the LA model is composed of three primary components, right? So learning assistants are undergraduate students who have recently passed a course and who are brought back into that course as peer leaders. And in particular, they are there to help facilitate active learning in discussion inside of the classroom. Okay. So that classroom practice is the primary component of the LA model. That's the learning assistant working with students side by side with the faculty member, okay? In addition to just having the students or the learning assistants in the class with the students, we also provide pedagogical training. They actually take a formal class in education theory and practice with us at the learning centers, where they're learning lots of different educational practices that are useful in their role in the classroom. Right? That's going to give them the education background. But when it comes to content, right, we at the learning centers can provide them with lots of educational background, but the content background is the purview of the faculty mentor. So the faculty of the course meets with their learning assistant on a regular basis to talk about lesson plans, to talk about how the class is going, and to talk about the content. So what we're seeing here is a marriage of the education practices and the faculty's content knowledge coming together to prepare the learning assistants for their classroom practices. Okay. Now, the ways that learning assistants are prepared with courses at Rutgers, they can be embedded directly into a course, such as lectures, labs, or recitations. And these embedded forms of learning assistants are the LAs working directly in a classroom with the faculty member or with a TA, for instance. So if your lecture is an active learning lecture and you want to do some breakout rooms, the learning assistants are there with you to help you facilitate those breakout rooms. Or if you're doing online labs, the LA is right there with you during class time as part of your instructional team, okay? The other way that learning assistants can be paired with courses is through the supplemental active learning study groups. Study groups are outside of class time, hence the reason they're supplemental, and students register and attend a study group on a weekly basis, right? So they register for the study group for the whole semester, and they attend the same study group at the same time every week. And learning assistants are developing materials alongside their faculty member to hold these active learning study groups to supplement what's happening in lecture, lab, or recitation, right? So these are the two ways that LAs are traditionally paired with courses here at Rutgers. Okay, but let's zoom in on what they actually do inside that class. So from Garrison et al. 1999, Garrison said that the learning experience for a student is comprised of three primary components, right? There's the social interactions that are happening inside of that classroom. And that includes interactions between individual students. It includes interaction between the students and the faculty teaching the class, but learning is a social process. There's the cognitive processes. Cognitive processes are happening inside of our students' brains, right? So there's the actual cognitive process of learning in which the student is going through lots of things inside their brain to grasp and understand the material. And then there's the classroom structure and content. And that is how we set up the learning space, how we are presenting content, et cetera, is all contained within that classroom structure and content. And these things overlap to create the learning experience for our students. Now, the learning assistants are actually working at the intersections of these three components. They're helping set climate, which is at the intersection of social interaction and content. They are supporting discourse, which is social interaction overlapping with cognitive processes. And they're also helping with formative assessment and lesson planning, which is the overlap of cognitive processes and classroom structure and content. So I'm going to go into each of these different intersections, starting with classroom discourse. The learning assistants manage classroom discourse. Now, when we talk about discourse, in the first model here, the square here represents the faculty and the circles represent the students. In a very traditional lecture format, we see information being moved in one direction from the faculty to the students. Here in this first diagram, we see the square representing the faculty, the circles representing the students, and information is flowing in a one-way path, right, from the faculty to the students. This is not discourse, right? Discourse is characterized by a flow of information in more than one direction. So we see here in the second, where there's a two-way flow of information from the faculty to the students and from the students back to the faculty. That is an increased level of discourse, right? We can enhance this discourse even further by, in the third model, we see information flowing from the faculty to the students and back, but also information flowing between the students, right? This is the maximum level of discourse. And as we increase this level of discourse, we see an increased engagement and we see an increase in knowledge construction inside the students. So this is actually setting the students up for a more engaging classroom, as well as greater cognitive structures being formed. So the students are actively engaged in developing their knowledge, okay? So the ways that the LA sets the learning assistant is really here to facilitate this process, right? The learning assistant serves as a facilitator of discourse by asking probing questions, and in particular, facilitating the student-to-student conversation. They act primarily as an intermediate here to help build that discourse inside that classroom, okay? The second intersection was setting climate, right, which was the intersection between content and social interaction. Now, when I say setting climate, right, there are three ways that I'm using the term setting climate. There's the cognitive way that the learning assistant sets climate. And in this, the learning assistant sets the expectations for the thinking behavior of the students in the class. So if a learning assistant walks up to a group of students and they answer a question very superficially, The learning assistant is going to say, okay, we need to think more deeply at this. I want you to think at this level, right? And they're going to probe the students into a deeper thinking structure, okay? So in other words, the learning assistant is saying, you have to be thinking at this level in this class. And they're setting that climate of what cognitive level should the students be operating at, right? And setting those expectations to the students. Similarly, there is an interpersonal climate that the learning assistant is setting. If a learning assistant walks up to a group of students and they're all sitting quietly and not engaging with one another, the learning assistant is going to get them engaging and set that expectation that, hey, in this class, you have to interact, okay? And not only are they setting the tone for what level of interaction, how much interaction, but also what is the tone of that interaction, okay? And then lastly, there is this affective climate that is set by the learning assistant. In other words, how do the students feel supported and motivated inside that classroom? And the learning assistants are using positive affirmations and encouraging words to help the students feel more supported and more motivated to learn inside that classroom. So these are the three ways when I say that the LA sets climate, these are the three ways that I'm referring to, okay? And then last, LAs give perspective on lesson planning and assistant formative assessment, okay? So I've got another little sort of diagram on this one. And it kind of forms a cycle. And in this cycle, the learning assistant sort of is taking our pedagogy courses, learning a lot about how students learn, and then they're going to combine this stuff that they're learning in our pedagogy course about education and how students are learning, and they're going to combine it with their student perspective and the course material, right? Because they've been students in this class, they're going to think, okay, when I was in this class, how did it work? And then they're going to give feedback to the faculty regarding the lesson plan. So in the preparatory meeting with their faculty members, the learning assistants are going to say, when I was a student, these are the things that I struggled with. And giving that feedback is going to help the faculty make adjustments to their teaching practices, okay? Then the LA and the faculty are going to step into the classroom together, and they're going to help deliver that lecture or deliver that active learning class. And then they're going to reflect together. They're going to think, how did it go this week? Right? What things are the students still struggling with? What are the places that we can improve this? And they're going to then bring that back with them to the pedagogy course. And they're going to learn some new material in the pedagogy course. And they're going to restart this cycle, right? So this is the way that the learning assistants are helping the faculty in their formative assessment and helping the faculty understand where the students are coming from and where the students might be struggling. Okay. All right. The learning assistants have a very large component of faculty mentorship. So they're working side by side with the faculty of the course. So I wanted to really mention here how the faculty utilize learning assistants most effectively. What can the faculty do to help the learning assistants in their jobs? And predominantly is talking to the learning assistants about the goals of the class. Since the LA is going to be there as a pedagogical agent, as a part of the instructional team, they need to know what kinds of learning goals they're trying to accomplish so that they can help reach those goals. The most effective learning assistants have a very strong sense of collaboration between the faculty and the LAs. So they're working with the faculty, the learning assistants are working with the faculty, not just to deliver that course content, but in the development of that course content, right? Going over your lesson plans and giving feedback, taking a look at worksheets and giving feedback. Those are all part of that collaboration that's going to really help the LA operate at their maximum. And then also debriefing with learning assistants, asking them, how is it going in this class? Did that lesson plan work? Are the students still confused about this? What do you think? Are the students feeling okay? Are they coping? Is the class too stressful right now? What are you hearing from the students? Because the students will share things with the faculty or with the learning assistant that they would never share with the faculty. So you can use the learning assistant sort of as your eyes and ears inside that class in a very unique way, since the learning assistants have a student perspective. Okay. And I'm going to turn it over to Sari to talk a little bit about the way that the learning assistants are trained, since she is our training specialist here at the Learning Centers. So the pedagogical training is a very unique aspect of the learning assistance program that Sari is going to talk about.
Great. Thanks, Corey. So along with the time that LAs are in contact with students in or out of classrooms and the time that they work with their faculty mentor, all first-time LAs co-enroll in a pedagogy course as part of their training and in preparation to support their roles. So the first-time LAs that are working during their semester, they are working both with students and the faculty, as well as taking this class at the same time. This pedagogy course, it is offered through the Learning Centers. So we have different instructors for each section. So myself, as well as Corey, we have coordinated and taught multiple sections of this class. And the LAs during this pedagogy class, it's a 3-credit class. Normally when it's been held in person, they meet for about 3 hours or so once a week. We'll show how we converted it for the online transition to be more conducive for their work. With the pedagogy course, this is where LAs learn how to place educational theory into their practice. So a lot of the different topics that are covered and that the LAs engage with are different modes of classroom discourse. So figuring out what are the best ways to engage their students and interact with them through discussion, through effective questioning. We spend a lot of time also on discussing what does cooperative learning look like? How do we effectively engage our students for working in small groups, or if they're in a larger lecture, or if they're working in recitation. There's also a focus on inclusive classroom practices. So we walk them through universal design of learning, through microaggressions. What does it mean to address the various needs of the diverse learners who they're encountering while they're in their sessions with students? How we also focus with them on how students construct their knowledge. So bringing into practice where the research and evidence shows for from the cognitive sciences side, and how to ultimately create positive affective spaces for their students, especially in this time where we are still living and learning through a pandemic, making sure that peer leaders are feeling well prepared and confident and comfortable in their skill set and in their knowledge to work with students who are still finding it challenging to work in an online environment. So these are overall a lot of the main topics that we focus on for the course itself. So looking now into how we have transpired into going into this past fall semester and this current spring with what the course looks like. Corey, you may need to move to the next slide to show this. Okay, great, thank you. So with the pedagogy course, so like I said before, it's normally a 3-hour in-person course where LAs meet once a week. We've converted it into a hybrid model for being in an online environment to be more conducive to that. So this hybrid model, rather than we split up the 80 minutes, we split up the 3-hour time into an asynchronous session and synchronous, an asynchronous work and an asynchronous class that the LAs attend. So every week they have weekly asynchronous activities to submit through Canvas, which is the platform that we use for the course. And then they attend an 80-minute synchronous class time with their instructor once a week. And a lot of the in-class activities involve breakout rooms, the fishbowl exercises, group discussions, virtual gallery walks, and really trying to model what we would hope and expect for them to use in their own practice with students on that active and interaction side. With the course, there are 2 different major assignments that the LAs work on throughout the semester, one being what's called an interview project. This is where they select a topic related to the discipline for which they are in LA for, and they essentially interview a student about this topic to explore their ideas. So they're not teaching them anything yet about the material, but they're trying to see what the mental models are regarding what the student currently thinks about the topic, and then they create a lesson plan based on the student's misconceptions, their mental model, what correct information they have, how accurate is in. So they're creating 2 different videos based on this and analyze their work after the interview and the lesson plan video. Then for the major paper for the course, we have them submit a teaching philosophy statement. And this is to understand their current beliefs and framework about what they, from their peer leader perspective. And we have them submit different drafts where they get feedback and incorporate current topics that we're covering throughout the pedagogy course to bring in that evidence to connect to their own practice as a learning assistant and as a student as well. So that is the overall scope with their pedagogy training for the course as well. Okay, so Corey, I think you could go to the next slide, and that might run into with LAs in an online environment.
Okay, so talking about how we adapted the learning assistant program to the online space, we actually maintained 100% continuity between the in-person instruction and remote instruction with the classes that we supported. There was a little bit of readjusting. So 95% of classes maintain their LAs in their original format. So if they were in lecture, the LA stayed in lecture. And usually that was in the form of synchronous breakout rooms during lecture or lab. But some courses decided to switch their LAs from an in-class application to study groups, right? So they had them in lecture, but they decided to take those lecture LAs and have them run study groups instead. And then only about 1% of courses that utilize learning assistants switched to an asynchronous format. So we actually maintained full support. The majority of learning assistants are used to facilitate active learning during breakout rooms, during synchronous sessions. That's the current state of the LA program. We still have approximately 300 learning assistants employed with the Rutgers Learning Center this semester, and they're all still mostly working with synchronous sessions and doing breakout rooms.
I'm going to mute myself there for a moment. So with along with the pedagogy training that the learning assistants receive their first semester as an LA, they also participate in continued training throughout their time working at the learning centers and in the LA program. So for the semester that an LA is first hired to work during the academic year, whether they're new or returning, they all participate in an initial training. And again, most trainings that we've had up until this, up until a pandemic have been in person with some online components. And since this past fall, we've been able to transform our peer leader training program, which I oversee and facilitate, to be completely online and to, again, have both asynchronous and synchronous portions. So for the initial training that they receive in creating foundation for their roles, creating expectations for their role in working as a peer leader, they attend a peer leader orientation. So this includes asynchronous modules that are on a Canvas site for both, again, new and returning LAs. The other portion to this that is synchronous, it's a 2-hour synchronous session for the LAs to participate in, as well as other peer leaders who work at the centers. And this focuses on topics such as student engagement, motivation, and group facilitation, as we see that has been, those are 3 of the most impacted aspects when it comes to teaching and learning for online, and also how to create a supportive learning environment during a pandemic. Of course, this is still a process that we are all living and learning through, but having the LAs spend a bit of time reflecting on what have they've experienced up until this point as a student and how they can help students who are in their own sessions to, whether it's to relate, to connect, to form a sense of community. We also support through different technology tutorials how LAs can use Zoom, how they use WebEx, Canvas if that's associated with the course that they're working for, and they have access to these different tutorials, so they can always refer to what's going to help them best for their students. Again, like has been said multiple times, remote instruction, it's been weaved as a theme throughout the workshop topics. So along with this peer leader orientation that the LAs attend, They also have continued training. So depending if they are a new or returning LA, they attend 1 to 2 professional development workshops that they get to choose whichever topic they want to each semester that they work as a LA. So there are both asynchronous and synchronous professional development workshops. And some of the topics that we focus on are managing groups, teaching study skills to students, inclusive classroom practices, critical thinking, exercising metacognition, and we also partner with Rutgers offices such as Office of Career Exploration and Success, with Office of Disability Services, the College Support Program, the Rutgers English Learning Institute, to also provide training in specific areas as well, for them to have access and be more informative of the students' needs for the populations that they're working with. So it all connects to the overall training that they do receive for their role. Yeah.
Wonderful. So a little bit about student feedback from these past 2 semesters of remote instruction. We developed a little brief survey to ask the students how they felt about their learning assistants in remote instruction environments, and just want to share some of that data with you. Could everyone see these graphs okay? Okay, so we see here that we ask questions like, overall, the LA provided continuity between in-person and remote instruction. And we had a lot of agreement with that. We had approximately 85% agreement overall with that question, and very little disagreement. There was some neutral, but the LA utilized a variety of tools and technology to promote student engagement and active learning. The LA provided opportunities for social interaction between students that support active learning. The LA was understanding of technical issues and assisted students whenever possible. And the LA made remote instruction accessible for all students. All of these questions had at least 85% agreement. And if we look at the amount of disagree or strongly disagree, we're only getting about 5% disagreement from the entire survey, which the entire survey, by the way, had an N of about 500 students. So this was a fairly large survey that we were surveying, a large population that we were surveying. We also gave a similar feedback survey to faculty, and I'll show you those results as well. Can everyone see these graphs here? All right, so overall, the LAs were helpful in the transition to remote instruction. We had a very large agreement with those. We did have a little bit of disagreement with that. Actually was just one particular faculty who had a negative experience. And then the LAs were valuable in achieving my course goals. We had no disagreement with that question. We also didn't have any disagreement from faculty that the LAs navigated instructional technology well. The LAs were important in achieving continuity between face-to-face and remote instruction. Also, no disagreement, a rather strong agreement. And my LAs were effective at facilitating interaction and discussion during remote instruction. Also very strong agreement. So we see here from both students and faculty that the learning assessments were critical in engaging students online, especially with the transition from a face-to-face class to a remote class and providing that continuity in instruction. Okay. So in order for you to sort of see the LAs at their best, we've taken a video of an LA in her actual classroom, and we've trimmed it down here and there, so it's a condensed version, but we would like you to actually see a little bit of what the learning assistants are doing inside of their breakout rooms when they're working in your class. So you can kind of get an idea of what the LAs really do. So I'm just going to share some media with you.
I wanted to give you like a little heads up on the project because I did it last year, and I know that a large portion, I don't know if you went through like the breakdown of the grading, but a large portion of that is activity. For that section, I just highly suggest going to his office hours or emailing him and like running your topic by him, because he has some good ideas and he'll tell you whether or not he thinks it's like creative or like whether like it's an interesting enough topic or not. I just highly recommend consulting him on that, because last year he required it for us, but then a lot of people didn't do it, so he didn't require it for you guys, but I think it would really help you if you did that. Just want to throw that out there. And then did anybody have any questions on what went over in class this week, or maybe the homework that was due yesterday?
I was a little confused about, I mean, I guess like understanding more conceptually, like why Carnot, like I get that it's like they're too ideal, like a car can't really be isothermal or adiabatic, but I feel like I have trouble like understanding exactly why, or like seeing it in my head.
Okay, yeah. Does anyone have anything to say on that? There's like a lot of different reasons, so there's a lot of right answers here.
I read something about like entropy, like when it's like going through combustion, not all of it is converted.
Yeah, do you guys agree with that? Yeah, that's completely right. So the Cornell engine was, remember, that was the ideal system. It's a theoretical engine that doesn't exist in real life because it assumes that no heat is being transferred or lost to entropy. And as we know, that just doesn't happen in the real world, right? You're always going to have some level of entropy when you have any form of energy transfer. Okay, if you guys think of anything, put in the chat or jump in. But if we don't have anything else for now, I wanted to do a little activity that kind of hopefully will relate to these concepts a little bit of like the vaporization and stuff like that. So did Dr. Shimbrock go over the bobbing bird discussion with you guys? He did, okay. I'm just gonna do a little poll. It's just yes or no. So just vote yes if you feel like you really grasp that and you understand like the concepts and the takeaways, or no if you feel like maybe you would need to go over it a little bit more. Okay. Everyone's in the same boat, which is good, which means that hopefully this activity will be helpful to all of you. So I'm going to do something similar to last time. I'm going to send you a little video. It's a lot shorter this time. It's like about 3 minutes, I think. It's longer, but just watch it until the 3-minute and 37-second mark. I'll put it in the chat. That's the timestamp, and I'm going to send the link. And then this time, it's a description of the bobbing bird, and it kind of explains the theory behind it, but I'm going to break it down into 2 steps. So the first step is going to be, I mean, do you guys remember like the motion of the bird, like what it does? Okay, it'll be a little bit clear in the video too if you need a refresher, but just for a general idea so I can explain this. There's the point where the bird just dipped its head in the liquid and the beak is wet, right? And then so the beak is wet and then the bird is gonna fall back down into the liquid. So the process of the bird having a wet beak and then falling back down into the liquid, that's gonna be step 1. And then step 2 is gonna be the bird coming back up out of the liquid. And breakout room 1 is going to talk about that first step I said, when the beak is wet and it's gonna fall down, and kind of like prepare an explanation together for why it does that. And then the second group, I want you guys to prepare an explanation for the other step when it comes back up. Does that make sense the way I explained it? Are you guys doing good?
So which part are we explaining again?
Yeah, you're room 2. So that's the second step, which is the bird standing back up again.
Okay, so should we start from like, the only thing I have for why the bird comes back up is when the tube goes out of the water at the bottom, which causes the gas to come up, and the liquid all comes back down. So the mass is heavier at the bottom now, which causes the bird to bob back up.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So I don't know why I can't retain this. So the tube goes out and then the gas can go in again. And then what happens?
So I guess this concept's a little tricky if you've never taken transport, but basically like flow is caused by a difference in pressure. So when the tube comes out, you don't have a pressure differential anymore. So the water can't rise up anymore. But I'm gonna go over it in a little more detail because I think the others might have a little bit of struggles with that too, because that's a concept that I don't think you guys really learned a lot about yet, like by junior year. But do you guys feel like you need that much more time? Do you guys think that you're ready to kind of present what you have? Okay, are you guys comfortable about this discussion? We just had to feel like this is like a lot.
I think so, but I'm not sure how comfortable I am with how comfortable I am.
Okay, so does anybody who feels like they understand the metal versus book situation, just the concept of why metal feels cold and a book feels warm, does anyone want to explain why that is? Maybe like summarize it?
I can try. So since metal has a greater density, in this equation, m would be larger, and it's like much larger compared to paper. So if the m is larger and the c is not that big for metal, so then that would create like a bigger Q, and Q is the heat transfer. So with the greater mass, there's going to be more heat transfer, which is why something feels colder, because more of the heat is being taken away.
Yeah, that's
my understanding.
Yeah, that's perfect. Do you guys get that? Have any questions on that still? Do you guys understand like why that might be? Like, why would it take so much more heat to heat up a gram of water than it would take to heat up a gram of gas?
Is it something like you have to like break the bonds of water, and that requires more energy than gas? You don't have to break any bonds. Versus like a solid is like really strong bonds.
And also something about water with polar bonds.
Yeah, you guys are all on the right track. Kinjal, did you have something to say too, or I didn't see if you turned your mic on?
I was just gonna say the bond thing too.
Okay. Yeah, you guys are right on with that. So like when you have especially a solid, like you have actual bonds, like all the molecules are bonded together. But even when you have a liquid and they're not bonded, but they're like floating around like closely to each other, they're still experiencing a lot of intermolecular forces. And so yeah, it is going to take a lot more energy to get them farther apart and to get them moving around faster. And remember how we said that temperature is basically correlates with the motion or the speed of the molecules moving around. So yeah, you guys are, yeah, you guys are right. And I think, does anyone have any questions on that? Okay, that was so impressive. You guys literally got that like right away. I did not understand that when I was in this class that quick. Yeah, okay, so that was everything that I really wanted to go over for today, but I did want to ask you guys, like, how has, like, did he release, first of all, did he release the homework this week or no?
So he's changing it, so he's gonna have this week's homework out tomorrow, and then it's due on Thursdays from now on.
Oh, okay.
Until like the project that's due March 2nd.
Okay.
And we don't have homework due the week that the project's due.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, because I think that the homework from last year was like very coding heavy, and he was like, I don't know, like he took your guys' feedback because I know he was going like really hard on the coding, and that was like a little bit tricky. But has that been better for you guys?
Well, the last homework wasn't really coding.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the last one was that the mountaintop one? And like
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then I just wanted to ask, like, I know I said this last time, but I don't know if you guys were all here. I know like Dr. Shimbrov was like, oh, like email me if you have any feedback, and if you don't feel comfortable, you can email this person. Like I think one of your classmates volunteered. Just want to reiterate that if you have any feedback for him and like you don't want to like tell him, like you can tell me, you can email me. I have meetings with him every week. So does anyone like have any feedback for the class at this point? Okay, and then of course, I know this is like a group setting, so it's okay if you don't want to share. Like I said, you can email me later. And then I just wanted to like get a little feedback from today. Like, what, like, because I know today we did, I guess we'll review. We did like the homework review. We did like the bird activity, and then we did like the specific heat, like I guess like little lecture. What part of today do you think was like the most helpful for you guys? So I can like put that into my format next week.
All our discussions really helped for me. Like first when we went into breakout rooms, about when we were discussing that, and when we just discussed like the paper versus metal and the two balloons, like all our discussions really helped for me.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad. Does anyone else like have anything they want to add?
I agree with that because it's like forcing me to think about the things that I wouldn't have otherwise thought about, and like it's making things a lot clearer.
So that was just a brief sort of overview of a condensed session with a learning assistant. So we can see here that the learning assistants are working in a lot of different contexts, and their primary role is to get students engaged and discussing. So based on what you saw, we're interested in these different discussion questions, right? So we're going to open these questions up to the room. So what did you observe in that video? What did you think the LA did effectively? What were some missed opportunities by that learning assistant? Did the video match your expectations of what learning assistants do? And so what would be sort of important skills or knowledge do you that you think learning assistants should have to support your courses? So, you know, this is now open discussion time for you to engage with us and ask any questions about the learning assistant program.
And you can use the discussion forum to share either responses or questions that you have regarding video about the LA program itself. So I put in the question, you know, what you found to be effective from that video. Also, you know, did the video match your expectations of what an LA does? Oh, great. Thanks, Corey. You know, did the video match what you were assuming LAs to do? How might it have been different? And then important skills or knowledge that you think it would be important for LAs to have, since this correlates to the training that we do provide them throughout their time in their LA role. So feel free to share in the forum or a question in the live Q&A.
Sorry, Corey, we have 4 minutes left. 4 minutes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And if it does help to think about while you're, say, responding or thinking about any of these questions in terms of what the LA who was, this was a study group for a biomedical engineering study group, and she was within Zoom, and there were times if it was difficult to tell, there were some parts where they were in a main room together, and then there were some breakout room activities going on. So if you felt that was important to the session, or if there was a missed opportunity there, anything that comes to mind.
Well, I would like to highlight some of the things that the learning assistant here was doing, and these are things that we train them to do, and that are based in the education theory and literature that we teach them. You'll notice that whenever a student asked a question, she did not immediately jump to answering that question. It was always, does anyone else agree with that? What does everyone else think? She always diverted to the rest of the group in order to allow other students to express what they thought about that student's question, or about what, if a student was doing an explanation, it was always, what do you think about that? So you notice that the learning assistant is typically asking more questions than they actually necessarily answer, because the goal here is that discourse. The students end up answering their own questions because she is diverting them back to the group. And so the group is answering one another's question and going back and forth more often, because she's not just interrupting the discourse to give the answer. So that was definitely one major thing I would like to really highlight, that she was doing exceedingly well in this particular video. The other was that she started the session with, how are you doing? How are you approaching the material? She gives a lot of her own personal feedback, like when I was in this class, ... And those little pieces of feedback are really actually very useful to the students and helping them feel connected to both a learning assistant and to the class. And then lastly, at the end, she asked for feedback. How is the class doing? How can the class be better? How can I be better as a learning assistant? And those kinds of questions are very, very useful for not only the LA to get feedback for, but for you as an instructor to get feedback from.
And like Angela pointed out, the way that the LA was trying to monitor the students, their understanding or lack thereof, and helping them to feel comfortable in the session too. Since again, whether it's with the content itself being online, the LA trying to address both of those aspects there. So great. So thank you.
Less than 1 minute left. Wrap it up.
So we have 45 seconds left. So we would like to say generally, thank you very much for attending our session today. If you're interested in the Learning Assistant program, you can visit the Rutgers Learning Center's website, and you'll find all the information about the Learning Assistant program on our website, including details, applications, etc. We will be sharing copies of this presentation as well. Or you can email us at learningassistants@echo.rutgers.edu if you are interested in additional materials.
Thank you all, and it was lovely to share our program with you. Thank you.
Sari and Corey, thank you so much. Great presentation. I'm sure participants will find it useful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.